Good evening, everyone. My name is Joshna Nagar. I'm the owner and director of APJ Technologies, which is a software company that initiates, builds, and launches business ideas into software solutions that are scalable and affordable for micro, small, medium, and large enterprises. I'm also the founder and director of the Women's Chamber of Entrepreneurs. We are a catalyst to unleash potential within female entrepreneurs by providing resources to them. I'm also the Global ICT Chairperson for the Circle of Global Business Women, and it's a privilege and honor to be moderating the webinar today for REGENT Business School to commemorate International SME Day. And I will be hosting a dynamic and inspiring panel today. Welcome to all our panelists, our participants, and the REGENT team for putting together this awesome webinar today. And thank you for taking time out to be part of this conversation today, which I think is so pertinent in this day and time. Just a little bit about REGENT Business School. It is a private higher education institution in South Africa, expanding over the continent. They provide accessible, affordable, and quality entrepreneurial business and management education, responsive to the critical needs of South Africa and the African continent within the context of a dynamic global environment. I would like to introduce to you today our very inspiring and dynamic panel today. And I'm going to start off with Mr. Shaikh. Mr. Shaikh is a mechanical engineer and a professor. He has an MBA and doctorate in philosophy, in leadership and business administration. He is the managing director of REGENT Business School and heads of the selections of honorary students at REGENT. He worked as a research advisor to the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, and he was He has served as an executive board member for several nonprofit organizations and has traveled extensively across Africa, in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. Professor Shaikh is especially concerned with finding solutions to Africa's need for a workable workforce able to compete in a globalized digital world economy. He's worked in the areas of in-demand skills, digital capabilities, and soft skills, and making an important and lasting contribution to the growth, not only of the honoris network, but to the development of Africa's growing youth democratic and workforce. Welcome, Mr. Ahmed Shaikh. We have Mr. Bulelani Balabala, who is the CEO of IAF Brands, the founder of Township Entrepreneurs Alliance, T. He serves on public and private boards, sector boards. And among some of his achievements, and please note I'm saying some of his achievements because his list is quite extensive and very impressive. It includes being featured in the Destiny Man's magazine in 2020. He was also selected as a top entrepreneur developer by SMEs South Africa. And he was recognized as a young achiever and trailblazer by His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa. He is a business speaker that focuses on township economy, branding, entrepreneurship, and inspiration. He has shared platforms with business industry and government leaders. Welcome, Mr. Bulelani Balabala. We have with us Ms. Kelebogile Mooketsi, who was a meteorological technician. She's the author of Money Bucket Holes Explained, a financial and credit repair coach, a trainer, speaker, and accredited debt counselor. She also serves as an advisory board member for TUT, and she has achieved many awards from various entrepreneurial development programs. She is a certified financial educational instructor, founder of Good Life Debt and Financial Experts, founder of Good Life Properties and Good Life Master Academy. She has completed qualifications in marketing, financial planning, and property investment. She has done a post-graduation in MAP at Wits Business School, and she has completed her training, the training course and a life coaching course as well. She believes that effective and lasting financial abundance starts with the why before the what to do. And she believes in an interconnected journey of life, gives purpose and money. Welcome, Ms. Kelebogile. And we have Mr. Mark Frankel. He is the CEO and co-founder of Black Umbrellas. He has completed the Soul of Leadership with Mr. Deepak Chopra. He's also completed his board exam at the South African Institute of Chartered Accountant and has a postgraduate diploma in accountancy. He also is a BCom from the University of Cape Town. Mr. Mark has a track record of developing purpose-led initiatives and driving innovation. He has several years of experience in finance and has worked closely with some of South Africa's leading entrepreneurs. Welcome, Mr. Mark Frankel. So, today, as we commemorate International SMME Day, we will explore some opportunities and some challenges that our SMMEs are faced with today. So I'd like to kick off with our first question. And I think, in this time and day of COVID and the way things are going, we've seen that the unemployment rate in South Africa has definitely increased, but at the same time, our employment rate has increased. Our businesses have increased, as well as our entrepreneurs. So COVID has definitely changed the way people are doing things today. And as leaders in your industry, I think the first question I would like to ask is, what would be the first piece of advice you would give a budding entrepreneur during these very uncertain times? I'd like to give Mr. Ahmed the first opportunity to start the discussion.
Thanks, Chairperson. Thank you very much. Welcome to everybody and to fellow colleagues on the panel. I guess my first advice up front would be get used to disorder and chaos. I think oftentimes we don't challenge our mindsets enough to get used to disorder and chaos. And if the current pandemic is anything to go by, we know that normality is not there. Businesses are seeking certainty. I think entrepreneurs in particular, early stage entrepreneurs in particular, must get used to being energized by the disorder and the chaos that we see around us, Chairperson. And perhaps for people listening in this evening to the webinar, it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but I think that entrepreneurs need to get energized to solve big problems and then find ways to monetize the solution of the problems. Because, Joshna, I think that meaningful entrepreneurial development and enterprise development doesn't happen, unfortunately, in sort of neat, successful, stable economic periods. And so I think that entrepreneurs need to, sometimes we call this anti-fragility. That's a term that a lot of people tend to want to use these days, but I want to keep it a lot simpler. I think that meaningful entrepreneurial activity happens in chaos. It happens when things go wrong and people find ways to fix what has gone wrong. And, if I had to sort of maybe just give an analogy from nature at the risk of sounding philosophical about it, Joshna, it's like winter gives way to spring and you see the early green shoots, or like the darkest part of the night gives way to the break of dawn. We almost want entrepreneurs to have those kinds of mindsets, to recalibrate their thinking about what opportunity means in an economic downturn. And unfortunately, we don't do very well at this, Joshna. I must say this up front, that there are a number of studies. One study many entrepreneurs may be familiar with, is the GEMS study, the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor study. And the facts, unfortunately, speak for themselves. Early stage entrepreneurial activity in South Africa is below the global average of similar countries. It seems we don't thrive in difficult circumstances. And in that sense, we're fragile. And so I think my first bit of advice would be, let's get used to unfortunately, the disorder and the chaos that we see around us, and let's begin to look at solving big social problems and then finding ways to monetize them.
That's 100%. I think also when we look at the chaos, it is actually where we find our creativity and our innovation, because we need to scramble out of that. And so a lot of people are actually finding their way out of the chaos, and that is why we are finding so many businesses that are sprouting, because people need to find a way to survive. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Mark Frankel to give us his view on this.
Thank you, Joshna. Thanks very much. Good evening to you. Good evening to the panelists and all the participants in the webinar. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak as well. I think it's largely about finding people who can support you and who you can share your journey with as well. You know, one of the positive messages we've had from the work that we do within Black Umbrellas is, you know, people say they're not alone on the journey, and it can be a terribly lonely journey in being an entrepreneur. You know, depending how you start, obviously, and your background and the circumstances that you're involved in. But, you know, typically the nature of an entrepreneur is starting out on their own to a large extent. And I think it's critical finding the support mechanisms, you know, that can help you on your journey. So both within your family and your community, because there are going to be a lot of tough times on the road ahead. There are going to be a lot of difficult circumstances that you face. You know, people are going to question what you're doing. You're going to question yourself in terms of what you're doing. You're going to be put into situations that you've never been in before. You're going to find things in yourself that you've never had to encounter and deal with before. Sorry, I'm making it sound very dramatic, and it's certainly not the intention. But I think it's, you know, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel, and, you know, to a large extent as well. There are resources out there that can be obtained. There are, you know, people that you can learn from. So I think that's quite an important lesson is, you know, get your support community right, find out who can support you in terms of the skills and resources that you need, the knowledge that you need to gain, help you develop a roadmap in terms of where you would like to take your business. And I mean, the thing that we would always like to encounter in life, and I mean, it's almost impossible these days, as Professor Shaikh mentioned, is we would like no surprises. And unfortunately, we're very much living in a world which is full of surprises. You know, tomorrow is not going to be the same as today. I think you can be guaranteed of that. And they talk about this VUCA world as well, you know, volatile, uncertain, etc., abstract, complex. And then you have to try and, you know, start a business within that. And I think, as was mentioned previously as well, you know, change and chaos bring opportunity. So it is a meaningful time, but then you need the resilience to be able to manage all of that as well. So it goes back to community again as well. I think you also need to be willing to fail quickly. I think that's also very important. And to validate your idea within the market, because you may think that the world needs exactly what you're developing or what you would like to bring, but you've got to test that and find out whether people will actually pay. You know, they might think it's a great idea, but will people actually pay for what you're looking to do? I think that's very important as well.
Absolutely. And I think in this chaos, you know, it's okay to be afraid, and it's okay to ask for help as well. And it's okay to feel lonely. So, you know, all the emotions that come with an entrepreneur, there is support out there. And you know, not everyone, I think a lot of people, they don't speak about the journey or the process that it took to become an entrepreneur, but everyone just sees this, you know, what they've achieved. And I think those are perhaps the stories that need to be shared on the journeys that people actually went through to get to where they want. Thank you, Mr. Mark. I'm going to ask Mr. Bulelani to step in and take on the question.
Thank you so much, and good evening to all the attendees. I just think for me, you know, just sort of thinking of the entrepreneurial journey, and I sort of get my, you know, my feed from my 15-year now, I think now 15-year entrepreneurial journey. You know, I think at some point you sort of get the advice and the sort of external motivation, and you're sort of prepped and told about how difficult the journey is. And to a degree, you are, I think to a degree, you are largely enticed by, you know, the shiny glimmers of hope, the glimmers of success and the sorts. But I think as you become, as you endeavor to go into this journey, you know, it's a journey filled with highs and it's a journey filled with lows. And I think I've personally gotten to a point where I think I'm most appreciative of the fact that I'm able to be given a chance each and every day to get back into the ring and to get into the gauntlet. that it's not necessarily about the highs respectively alone, nor the lows, but it's just being able to participate in the journey consistently. And I think the second is, I think the biggest thing I'd always say is enjoy being part of the journey and participating in the journey. And, you know, I think celebrate each and every milestone. You know, I think that milestone could be as insignificant to someone else as having your own voice prompt, you know, for your own company. But those are the sort of milestones that you would then personalize as victory miles. And I think on the secondary part is to then say, you know, most of the time as aspirant entrepreneurs or as a startup businesses and small business, we are so fixated in making the product perfect. And we actually even overlook the fact that the product is ready for the market. And we don't necessarily even rely on the market as being a dictator for the products that we are developing and the service that we're developing. And I think for me, you could spend the next 10 years coming up with the perfect product, but I would believe, you know, my advice to you would be to say, throw your hats in the gauntlet, put your ideas out there. And if you have perfected the product to the best of your possibilities, put it out to the consumers to help you and guide where the product should be, where the service should be, what your actual go-to-market needs to be. Because when you are spending long nights and long days overthinking the product, then it doesn't actually even get you to the point where you perfect it for the actual market. And I think it's also in understanding that it's the market that will determine what the product is, what the product should be like. You know, so being fixated, I think at the end of the day, you know, I think the last thing I'd want to put out is, in this particular question is, at the end of the day, be fixated in driving solutions for the customer. Be fixated in delivering value. I think one of the sayings that is out there that is associated with entrepreneurship is, you know, always deliver, and under promise, always deliver more value. Never compete on the basis of price, but compete on the basis of value, because that is where you are able to match your potential.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that over deliver and under promise, you know, because that is actually what it is. And I think the moment you start getting momentum, when you just sell a product, is when you start, you know, realizing that it will, you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I think at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, we just need to sell, you know, because like you said, we focus so much on getting things perfect, and it's really not about getting things perfect. It's about getting out there and getting your name out and getting your product out. Thank you, Mr. Bulelani. And Miss Kelebogile, can we get your opinion on this, please?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity and the invitation to be here. It's great to share this virtual stage with such a powerful man in their own right. I think for me, it's about going back to the drawing board as to why would one want to be an entrepreneur or being a business person. You know, if it comes from within and around your passion and your gifts, it's very easy. It's not easy, but it's much easier to stick around during these trying times, you know. So do things for what you believe you can solve a problem. If one would wake up in the morning and ask themselves, what problem can I solve within my business or within my hustle? I think that's what one can, you know, be able to sustain the trying times. You know, wearing a financial coach hat, which is very much stuck on my head. During this time of COVID-19, when things are just so unpredictable, finances are really a challenge within the business and also on a personal level. So being financially savvy more than ever, this is the time. You know, how do you also find synergy between your business and your personal finance and not mix and matching the transaction between the two? Because every rand really counts if it's time for one to take control of their finances and give every rand a job. I usually say give every rand a job. So where possible, making sure that the little that you get, you reinvest in yourself, in improving yourself and also your business. I see a lot of entrepreneurs really missing out on a lot of opportunities because of lack of discipline or financial wisdom around their personal and business ventures. So with opportunities slipping away from your hands like that, at this point in time, one cannot afford to miss that. So yeah, I would say, just to wrap this one, to say, do what you believe is what you are here for, solve a problem with what you are good at, and everything else will just be about adding value, like Bulelani said, that, you know, it compete on adding value, and you cannot add value if you're not passionate about what you do.
Absolutely, and I think that is the basis of everything, to be passionate about what you're doing. Because if you're selling something that you don't really care about, you're not going to get it out there. You're going to really drag your feet. But when you love something that you're doing and you know it's solving a problem, you will find a way to actually get it into the market. I also love what you said about finances, because a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize that they need to be very, very careful with their money, especially in the early stages. And, you know, when it comes to, there's a lot of grants out there, there's a lot of initiatives out there to actually help entrepreneurs. And I think we need to be savvy with our monies. We can't just say, wow, we've got this load, let me go and buy all the school equipment. And, you know, that's not why those grants are out there. And that is something we actually must talk about. While we're on finance, yes, there's a question out there that's asking about traditional banking. Does traditional banking support SMEs? And I'm going to throw it out to the panel. Anyone can go out and answer.
I think, in my opinion, they do to a certain extent. You know, it's a yes and no kind of a thing. But what I would like to twist the question is to say, it's more about how creative and can you be in raising funds for your business. Collaborations and networking can even be a better solution for you, instead of being stuck in a traditional way of looking for the bank to assist you, your business. So it's a question of how you present your proposal to the banks. And some banks are still lenient, some banks are still really coming up with or sticking to the red tapes. But when you have collaborations and it's a partnership, you're not just knocking at the bank alone. You know, you may find that with that collaboration, things will make it easier for your applications to go through.
But do you think that the banks are supporting SMEs enough to get them on their feet?
Not necessarily in what I have experienced. I think there's also a gap between what banks need and what entrepreneurs need. There is this lack of alignment in terms of these two parties coming together. But unfortunately, it's the SMEs that would be misfortune in the situation. But I think if they were to relax their way of issuing credit, because you know, as a credit repair coach, one of the things that they will still bind the creditors is the affordability, according to the NCA Act. So if one finds that entrepreneurs is blacklisted or the credit issues are not on par, that also come across as one of the challenges in entrepreneurs accessing the opportunities within the banking industry. So there's this alignment. That's why in the beginning, I said it's very key that entrepreneurs also find their way of making sure that their finances are in a better situation to access opportunities. And when I said opportunities, I also included the banking sector and the funding sectors that can come onto their plate. So, but I think there's still more that the banks need to do to understand us as entrepreneurs, but especially the service industries where you cannot talk about collateral, you know. There's not much that is tangible that one can say, all right, I've come from this point to that point. But when you're doing service type of business, it's not that easy to find funding from the banking industry.
Which is actually going to take my next question. I saw Mr. Bulelani, did you want to say something?
I think just a quick one. Having done some work with some banks, I think on my perspective is they could do a lot more. I think what they have done is some banks have developed great products, but they have not communicated those products well with the SMEs. And I think it's going back to the sort of catchphrases that we've sort of seen over the years, like we're driving SMEs to formalize, we're driving small business or informal businesses to formalize. But that sort of conversational piece has never taken into consideration what that actually means for the entrepreneurs in and themselves. And I think consistently from a banking perspective, whenever we've spoken about banks supporting SMEs, it's always been limited to, I guess, their commodity of the commodity of trade, which is providing credit facilities. But I think the crux of the conversation or the ethos here from a support perspective is building a culture of entrepreneurship and being able to associate and also work with industry practitioners in the various sectors to be able to reach out to that community of entrepreneurs. Because I think then when they sort of try to internalize the support and driving support for the actual SMEs, there's always been consistent miscommunication with the sort of support that they wanted to bring out there. But I think if you are able to, number one, build culture, number two, work with industry practitioners, like your redHUBs, your black umbrellas, or industry practitioners that are working within the various sectors each and every day, then there will be more value from a banking perspective. Then you'll be able to onboard more clients from a banking facilities perspective, from saying speed point perspective, and so on and so forth. But you will then be building an ethos of culture, which is one of the most important things. I mean, you sort of pick it up when you look at, I mean, they're not a bank, but you look at a Yoko sort of as a sort of a setup. So they sort of built a culture, and I think the culture sort of drives the products that they sell. So at the forefront, they sort of put the entrepreneurs' needs and desires before anything else. And I think that's one of the key things. But I think from a banking perspective, where you've got home loans, you've got consumers, you've got a consumer level, you're trying to cater to students, you sort of go amiss. But when you are able to then work with practitioners that operate within the sectors on a consistent basis, then you'll be able to get to the heart of how you drive solutions and do these solutions actually drive impact.
I like
Joshna,
that.
can I just add 2 or 3 quick points, if you allow me?
Absolutely.
Let me just be provocative for a moment. I think that banks need to significantly disrupt the current business model. And I think with the kind of chaos we're seeing in the global economy, when you find banks, important institutions maintaining such traditional business models, it makes it very hard for all of the players in an economy to reorganize themselves. So let me just say that, but just in case people think I'm sort of being self-righteous, I belong to a sector called higher education. Higher education needs to disrupt its model equally, and it needs to rethink how it skills people in an economy. So banking, education, other major sectors need significant reform, and that won't come without disruption. That's the first point. The second point is, I recall in a trip to Abidjan 2 or 3 years ago, I met the president of the African Development Bank, and he was making the point, Joshna, that about $100 billion was earmarked for enterprise development, focusing largely on young people across the continent over the period 2018 to 2023, 2024. He says, but we can't find young entrepreneurs who make meaningful pitches to such funding. And so sometimes I think it's about looking within, and it's almost, Joshna, like stress testing your ideas. What is the quality of your pitch? Why should somebody listen? More importantly, why should they support you financially? And have you thought about all of the permutations of this idea, the competitive environment, etc.? And is there quality and all of the comments that other colleagues have made on this panel? So I think the quality of the pitch is oftentimes a challenge for funding institutions and development finance institutions. That's besides the fact that banking formally needs to fundamentally disrupt its model and reorganize itself for an economy like South Africa's economy.
I like what you said there. At the end of the day, if you cannot buy your product from your own pitch, then who else is going to buy it? So you need to make sure that when you're pitching, you would want to buy your own product before you take it out there. Which brings me to my next question about...
Sorry, Joshna, could I... Sorry, I just...
Oh, sure, yes.
As well then, if I may, maybe be a little bit more controversial than Professor Shaikh.
Sure,
I mean, banks largely lend money to people who don't really need it. So I think that's the gist of it. No, and in a way, they force into that position because of the risk and compliance requirements that they need to comply with. Banks can't take any risk. That's the gist of it. And if they do, then it's priced into the product. And I mean, people always talk about this missing middle. And if you look at the missing middle globally in terms of people who need the finance and the finance that's available, we're talking trillions of dollars, that is lacking in this market. So what invariably happens in the small business space is that you have these intermediaries who are willing to take on the risk that the banks won't, but then it's priced into the product. And the people who can least afford paying those sort of interest rates for the funding land up doing so because it's the only source of funding that they can get. And it then becomes their bottom line, becomes a lot less competitive, and it just gets caught in a vicious cycle. So I think in these volatile, uncertain times, we've got to look at innovative products to be able to get the economy going, to be a catalyst, to get the growth going that we need to see. We can't stick to business as usual.
Absolutely.
So the banks have to take more risk, but it's unlikely that it's going to be, that's going to happen. Bulelani mentioned Yoko. So I don't know if people are aware, but they provided a financing model where they would give you finance based upon the sales that they were seeing on the point of sale terminals that they provided. So they mitigated their risk because they knew, well, I suppose until lockdown happened, that probably threw a bit of a spanner in the works in that regard. But at least they could reasonably predict the cash flows that you were going to see, and then could extend credit on the back of that. So we need to see more of those innovative, financing mechanisms to get things going.
Absolutely. And, while the thing is that Yoko's done a very good thing there, because now, you walk into a flea market and somebody can use a credit card with that small entrepreneur that's sitting there, whereas before they couldn't. So they've done an exceptional service to the smaller entrepreneurs, the micro ones, which leads us to our next question. So all entrepreneurs, as far as, I work with in the Women's Chamber of Entrepreneurs, and we see a lot of entrepreneurs starting off with, where can I get funding? Where's the market access? And I know that, market access and funding are two of the fundamentals of our journeys as entrepreneurs. It's what makes our businesses. And I think at the end of the day, it's also what creates that innovation and that makes you want to take, you'll find new ways to get your product into the market. And what a lot of entrepreneurs are doing now is that they're looking for the funding option, like an easy access kind of option, which is not necessarily in line with, with building up that innovation and getting the creativity out and getting the juices flowing for entrepreneurs to really go out there. My question is, we are looking at private and public sectors to solve the problems of getting market access and funding. What are your thoughts and opinion on this? I'm going to start with you, Mr. Mark.
Thanks, Joshna. Sure, it's a big question. I suppose, if we start off on the funding side, you know, funding is a part of a business at any stage of its journey. It's just, you know, coming from different sources, I suppose, you know, to a certain extent. So if you have a look at the initial trajectory of a business, I know it's a bit of a dramatic term, but they talk about the valley of death, effectively, that you need to get across before you're generating sufficient cash to be able to cover your obligations. And that initial money normally comes from the so-called, you know, friends, family, and fools, because when you're largely at a conceptual stage or you're still building your prototype or trying to get things off the ground, nobody's really going to fund you. And then you get to a stage where you're generating sufficient revenues. I'm sure Kelebogile will have something to say about this as well. You know, it's very important to realize that whatever funding you're taking on board, you're going to have to pay back at some stage. You know, and people forget that, you know, to a certain extent. So if you look at the cash that you've got to generate from your business, I've got to generate enough cash to pay my expenses in my business. I've got to generate enough cash to cover my own living expenses effectively. And I have to generate enough cash to repay my debt. And you've got to factor that into your business journey. And then there are also a whole lot of different types of funding in essence. So you've got to be aware of which type of funding is most appropriate for what you're looking to do within your business. So, sorry, just to get back to your question then in terms of the reliance on, you know, governments and corporates. So yeah. I don't know how much reliance there is, you know, to a certain extent, because once again, the amount of capital that's needed far exceeds the requirement, but it's got to be responsible capital to a certain extent, you know. And in certain instances, I think one does need to look at a blend of a grant and funding, or to look at funding instruments where you can possibly convert the debt to equity, or, you know, to a grant if the business opportunity doesn't work out. But we've got to be able to find these mechanisms, because in South Africa, we face a huge challenge in that only about 2% of R&D and innovation actually gets to market as a commercially viable product. And there's a lot of stories behind it and a lot of, you know, reasons for that. But capital, you know, is certainly one of them. So I think there's a huge lack in South Africa for venture capital, for angel investors. And we're seeing a lot more of it now. I mean, we're getting these great stories every day. This week we had 2 fantastic stories, or last week, sorry, in terms of this product Wiz app, which I think it was through Knife Capital effectively, that they've brought us further rounds of funding on board to be able to scale and grow their products. We had our first South African unicorn. So unicorn is a company which has reached $1 billion in valuation effectively. And that was Go1, which is a company which had created online learning content, I think it is. So we're seeing amazing stories coming through, but it's that initial funding and capital which makes it all, you know, possible. So it's always going to be part of your journey as an entrepreneur and a business person. And even when you get to a mature stage, it's sometimes cheaper to take on debt than to give away equity effectively. So debt's always, or funding's always going to be part of your business journey. But it's a question of how you take that on responsibly and whether your business can generate the required returns in order to pay that debt back.
Absolutely. And I think it should not be your first go-to, you know, and it should not be the priority in growing your business, but you need to make sure that what you're selling is viable for the market, and go out there and just get it out there. So thank you for that, Mr. Mark. I'm going to go to Kelebogile. I think you've got something to tell us.
Mark has shared a mouthful on this one. I think mine is to say, you know, in as much as you say it should not be the only or the first point of trying to find funding, but what can I encourage the entrepreneurs is that if you do that kind of application and it get declined, it's very key. It's very important that you find out the reason why and really work on that. And if you realize that the solution could come out from collaborations, as I mentioned earlier, then find ways to collaborate with other businesses within the sector or within the industry, so that you are able to leverage on what we call economies of scale. And one of the things that Dr. Miles Monroe said, that sometimes what you need is not money, but a wealth idea. So if you realize that when you knock at the private and public sectors and you're not winning, find a way to make sure that you find funding, like crowdfunding. There are a lot of websites within South Africa and internationally so that can fund your business, especially if it's the business that serves the community. If it's the business that, but you need to be able to understand what there are also their requirements in terms of funding. One thing
I think we lost Ms. Kelebogile. Mr. Bulelani Balabala, I think we can go to you to take on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thank you so much for that. I think in my view here, I mean, market access becomes a very important sort of conversation from an entrepreneurial perspective, and I guess also being able to raise the sort of funding that will then help you in moving your business to the next level. And I think one of the ways in which I've sort of looked at it from an entrepreneurial perspective is I've always said to the entrepreneur, sort of, I think the first step for me is, you know, sort of raising the capital from your customers. Now, this is obviously industry specific and then based on which part of the value chain you want to play and participate in. And I think based on that sort of chat and conversation I'd have with them, I think the second part would be understand the value chain, because I think there are various levels and points at which you can enter the sector that you want to get into, and the various levels that you want to enter they've got a cost attached to them, and obviously the higher you go, it becomes more stringent from a regulatory perspective, and it becomes a bit of a challenge. But I think it becomes also very important for the entrepreneur to understand the lay of the land, and I think to understand the opportunities that are available through triple BEE, opportunities that are available through enterprise supply development opportunities that are also available to these entrepreneurs. And I mean, I'll make an example. I mean, a couple of years ago, and it's about 9 years ago, when we wanted to buy our first sort of in-house equipment machinery. And this machinery, I think at the time was about 180,000. We couldn't raise those funds, but I think the only way, or one of the ways that we were able to raise these funds was through a new client that we are brokering a service for. This client is Joe Public, which is one of South Africa's largest advertising agencies. And the sort of conversation that we had at the time with Pepe Marais is that, you know, it would feed into the enterprise supply development, but to a degree, can you give us an interest-free loan? And we would then be able to provide services to a degree to a Joe Public or the sorts at a discounted rate. And you find that because of the fact that you are able to explain the actual value that the consumer or the client at the end of the day is able to derive, you now put yourself in a position where an institution which is a non-fund giving institution, which is an institution that is not in the credit giving facilities perspective, now opening themselves up to putting funds up to getting you equipment. And I think that's sort of how I've always looked at the sort of funding conversation. I mean, funding is an important part, but I don't necessarily think that the funding conversation needs to be limited to the banking sector, the angel investors, the DFIs that are out there. But I think one of the lowest hanging fruits are the consumers and the customers. So the consumers and the customers that we have, and we always consistently overlook that, because I think as an entrepreneur, when you are starting, if you're a startup and you're a small business, you want to be as lean as possible, because when you are sort of starting out in the first couple of years and you're already dealing with loans and debt, it sort of hampers on your creative ability, because now one of the key and critical things that is going to be driving you at the end of the day is the fact that there is a loan that you need to service. So absolutely. I think it becomes important for you to be as lean as possible. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't need that 10 million or 100 million. I think what one is trying to say is that be as lean as possible, stretch that back as far as you possibly can, and collaborate and, you know, work with the consumers that you kind of have and sell them a solution and a product for you to sort of reach the sort of next mile of funding or the next round of sort of seed and an investment.
I think, you know, it's just about being resourceful with what you have and not being afraid to go out there and just not look at funding as your first option, but look at all the options you have on the table and then go out there. I'm going to go to Mr. Ahmed to give his views to us on the subject.
Thanks, Joshna. I think maybe just a bit of self-talk that entrepreneurs must have also. Let's not have unrealistic expectations. I think oftentimes we sort of sit with ideas that we think are good and we're waiting for somebody, you know, to pay attention to us. The reality is in South Africa at the moment, I mean, you made reference to the public and private sectors in your question, Joshna. I think that the political economy in South Africa is at such a challenging position. We're so grappling with just the pandemic among many other public sector challenges, least of which is corruption, etc. I don't think that there are a lot of people paying attention within the broader sort of public sector, so to speak. The private sector is attempting to adapt, trying to reorganize, figuring out what the next cycle of the economy is going to be like. And I think it's hard. So in a sense, South Africans are, if you forgive the expression, we're sort of winking in the dark. Nobody's really noticing that we're winking at them, right? And so I think we've got to stop winking in the dark, and we've got to have some tough conversations with ourselves. What competencies do I need to succeed in this tough economic environment? And where am I going to build those competencies? Is that formally? Is that informally, non-formally? Is that in a network? Is that with an incubator? Is that with an educational institution? Is it with a few of those kind of people? That's one. Number two, I think we need to be realistic. The Hollywood type of enterprise development doesn't really happen in the real world, where everything works out and somebody's always waiting, you know, to sort of hold your hand. You've got to go and seek it out. And as Mr. Frankel said in his opening remarks, it's hell of a lonely. And I think if somebody wants to be inspired by how tough and lonely it can be, and how success is often preceded by many opportunities of failure and years sometimes of difficulty, there are many case studies out there. But just read the story of the founder of Nike, you know, the brand Nike. Just do it. It's a fantastic story about repeated failures and setbacks, and literally like the world was conspiring to make the founder of Nike fail. And I think this ability to keep on picking yourself up, dusting off yourself, and just sort of plowing away again. So I think that we must be able to build this kind of resilience and robustness or anti-fragility, whatever word you'd like to use. Just stop complaining and look within and just get on. Maybe just the last quick point to make, Joshna, here is that Bulelani made the point about maybe raising capital from your customers. I met an entrepreneur in Hong Kong a few years ago at a conference. I often quote this example. He's the founder of Homework Together. When I met him in 2018, he was about 18 or 19 years old. He's based in Hong Kong. He's a Chinese entrepreneur. And he had a simple sort of problem he wanted to solve. Well, what seemed simple? He says Chinese parents don't get to spend enough time with their children because they work in the cities and the children go to schools for many hours in the rural areas. So he wanted to solve this problem of getting parents and children to do homework together. So he created an app called Homework Together. And when I met him, his app was about 2 or 3 years old. At the time when I met him, in the 3rd year or 4th year of his business, he had 20 million registered customers. They were paying about 10 to 15 US dollars per registration on the app. And he raised significant, I mean, you can do the revenue. He's raised significant capital from his customers. So I think providing a service that's really necessary, there's a need out there. He's a social entrepreneur, so he solves a social problem. He found a way to monetize it. There were no traditional factors of production as we teach in economics, land, labor, capital. What he had was talent and an eye for detail about what a social problem is in his community that he wanted to solve. So I think we really need to have tough conversations with ourselves. We've got to get stronger and develop a thicker skin, and we've got to stop winking in the dark.
I think also on that note, we've got to stop thinking on who can save me, but rather turn inwards and say, how can I save myself? How am I going to make my business run? I don't need to rely on corporates and public sectors to make that happen for me. But I need to now take the reins in my hands, and I need to run with that. And I think that mentality, that mindset needs to change drastically in South Africa, where we're not becoming reliant, but we're becoming dependent on ourselves. Which brings me to another pertinent question. So, there are so many resources out there. There's so many other ways to gain capital or funding. And I think our entrepreneurs are pretty much in the dark about, all these opportunities that are out there for them. And I'm going to take something like the POPI Act compliance that all businesses need to have implemented by the 30th of June, which I'm sure a lot of the micro entrepreneurs don't even understand what that is. So my question is, how do SMMEs close the gap of becoming, to operate optimally by finding all these resources? What do they need to do to find these resources? Going on websites and all of that is one way, but what would be another way that we could do that? Mr. Bulelani Balabala, I'm going to ask you to start with that, please.
Thank you so much. I think this sort of platform and conversation we're having right now is where the SMME needs to be plugged into. I think if you're in an SMME, I think after this sort of chat, you need to be looking up when is the next sort of huddle session that the redHUB is going to be hosting, REGENT Business School, Black Umbrellas is going to be hosting as well. Because I think it's very important as an entrepreneur for you to sort of hive in and around the spaces that are linked to your development and growth, because I think personal development and development in and around your entrepreneurial journey is sort of a deliberate exercise that you sort of need to undertake on a consistent basis. But I think you sort of look at the POPI Act, and I think for me, it's not just necessarily the POPI Act. I think, when I was having a conversation with some small business owners, and I think I was asking them in and around the fact that do they understand the regulatory framework just at a basic level in the industries that they're in, and all you got was blank stares. So I think it becomes important for the entrepreneur to understand that to be effective in your entrepreneurial journey, you need to understand the lay of the land. You need to understand the game at which you're playing. If you're an entrepreneur that's dealing with government, understand the SCM processes, procurement processes for the various corporates that you want to deal with. Understand, their financial year end, what their KPIs are, the triple MFA policies. It becomes very important because I think what you almost see as we do the work that we do in and around the country, working with township and rural entrepreneurs, is that it's a lack of understanding, it's a lack of access to, it's a lack of information. And I won't necessarily to a degree say it's a lack of access, because I think one of the biggest things that I want to drive across to entrepreneurs that, it's all incumbent on you to go out there and get the information. There is no help that's going to come. There is no cavalry that's going to come. I think, which is why I think to a big degree, entrepreneurship becomes a lonely journey, but I think only made comfortable by being able to build an ecosystem of like-minded individuals that are able to help you. But I think it's being able to put yourself in a position where, number one, you go out there, you ask the questions, you engage the CEDAs, the CFAs, the NYDA, so that you can make your own sort of informed decision in and around, are they resourceful enough to deliver the sort of value and support that you're actually looking for? And which organizations should you actually be going out there chatting to and driving the sort of growth and support that you're looking for? But I think I sort of look at my entrepreneurial journey and growth. It's always been spawned by me being able to expose myself to new ways of thinking. So I think there's a professor by the name of Dr. Marco Sorakova from Regenesis, and I think he said something very interesting a couple of years ago to say that, you know, we start businesses according to the level of our education. So it kind of makes sense for me why 16 years ago, when I started my entrepreneurial journey, started off as an internet cafe, because that's all I was exposed to in the dusty streets of Tembisa, right? Because all I was exposed to then was either starting a shisanyama, a car wash, a hair salon, or an internet cafe. But, you know, what is then the best way of equipping an entrepreneur, especially from a previously disadvantaged background, with what the world actually has to offer, is them being able to expose themselves through the internet, is them being able to open themselves up to actually reading, then being able to open themselves up to an ecosystem or a networking platform that are able to challenge them and provoke them to think bigger and to actually grow deeper so that they can strengthen the value that they want to drive.
So, Mr. Bulelani, I just want to go a little bit deeper into that. So if we look at the township entrepreneurs, let's take the street vendors, for example. How, I'm sure at some stage they'd want to move their businesses up a level. What would you suggest? You know, how do we get them ready? How do we get them compliant? And how do we, you know, get them to close the gap?
I mean, you know, quite strangely enough, so we've had a conversation with quite a few of them actually, and quite a large number of them. I think over 60% are not interested in formalizing. And I think when you sort of unpack the reasons why, I mean, just as a basic SME or an entrepreneur, just to manage the sort of being a formalized business will cost you nothing less than 10,000 Rand a year. Yeah. Now, this is managing PAYE, whether you've got staff members or not. This is now managing, paying an accountant or retainer every single month, filing annual returns, filing returns to SARS. You know, there's so many, and then the bank is penalizing you for the fact that you're not transacting and you're not making money. So I think for me, the sort of conversation then we need to have, not even conversation, but the sort of action points that we need to then have is we need to then be cognizant of the SMME. And I think we sort of did this with one bank at a certain point, and we said we'll sort of play. We sort of put our head on the chopping block here. So we'll get 34 SMMEs who will then become national service providers. And in the time that we onboard these small businesses or unformalized or rather informal businesses, who will then help them to document the businesses. But the sort of carrots that we dangling to these entrepreneurs is the fact that you are actually getting a procurement opportunity. And I think the big risk and the big fear with a lot of these entrepreneurs is the fact that, so I'll go through the whole mile of registering and being compliant and registering for QUADA, but at the end of the day, it doesn't guarantee the actual procurement opportunities at the end of the day, both with corporate and also from a government perspective. So at the end of the day, corporate is the beast that it is, and it's a capitalist beast, and I won't blame it. But from a governmental perspective, I mean, you sort of look at the past couple of months, ever since the lockdown began, the Department of Small Business has been consistently missing in action. And then you sort of sit there and you ask yourself, where are the guys who are actually being paid on a monthly basis consistently, who are supposed to be championing support, not financial support, but actual support? And that sort of conversation is my last point that we have always had with them, and my engagement to the ministers to say, don't give any money. That's limited thinking. We don't want money. But as entrepreneurs within the space, what we need you to do is play an active role in actually regulating enterprise supply development spaces, because billions and billions are spent in each and every year, but these go into the coffers of 2 or 3 individuals instead of them actually going towards the development of entrepreneurs. And then you get a few programs that are actually interested in driving development and growth. Because I mean, we're sitting today with the black umbrellas that have been able to experience and meet entrepreneurs that have actually been able to say, we've been impacted and so on and so forth. But what about the bulk of them that have been funded by government institutions and agencies and corporate agencies that are not doing the work that they need to? So if we are interested in formalizing that, we also need to be driving, opening up the pipeline to be able to then facilitate growth opportunities for these entrepreneurs. Now, this is by no means a feeding scheme or an opportunity for everyone. At the end of the day, entrepreneurship is a battle and only the strongest will survive, but let's allow the terrain to be a fair terrain of competition.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, with those challenges, it becomes easier just to stay where you are instead of venturing into becoming more formalized. So Mr. Mark Frankel, I would like to hear your view on this.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Joshna, because those are the rules of the game, unfortunately. You know, if you want to play the game, you've got to play by the rules. And, you know, whether the rules are right or not, that's a discussion as well. So there is strong lobbying around, you know, reducing the compliance requirements for small business, because I do think they're overly onerous within South Africa. You know, they do have their place, and, you know, probably more applicable once a business gets to a certain size. You know, allow a business the freedom and the space, you know, to grow and become sustainable, and then bring on the additional compliance. But there's just too much compliance at the early stage of a business. But either way, if you want to secure corporate procurement and if you want to get funding, you have to be compliant. There's no way out of that effectively. So yes, there is a cost attached to it. But if that's the route you want to take your business, then it's an investment that you have to look at making. And I mean, knowledge is power, effectively. If those are the rules of the game, you've got to understand them in order to play the game. And so, I mean, I'm going to punt, you know, black umbrellas a bit here, but, you know, as part of our development program, we provide the training to obtain those skills. You know, the outcome of the training is to get your house in order in terms of having those requirements. And then we also provide support services, you know, to help you keep everything current and up to date. But one of the benefits, I suppose, of the COVID situation has been this huge explosion of free knowledge to a certain extent. So I mean, if you were, you know, to look carefully and regularly, you'd come up with a wealth of resources and free information, webinars, you know, seminars, one like this one. We've hosted quite a few as Black Umbrellas as well. So there are those resources out there, at least to get a basic understanding of what you need to do. I think that's the important thing. You know, once you understand what you need to do, then you can take the steps to get it done effectively. So it's really empowering yourself around the knowledge. I think that's very important. And then, and probably where businesses learned it the hardest was around the COVID debt relief scheme, you know, and there's been a lot of media around it, obviously, in terms of businesses needing to be compliant in order to access the funding. And the vast majority of small businesses weren't. So that really hurts, I think. But it's, you know, if you want to play in the corporate or government procurement space, if you want to get funding for your business, you're going to have to empower yourself and get your business compliant.
So you're going to have to go out there and basically find a way. And I suppose you learn as you go. So, you know, you'll ask a question and someone will direct you, and that's just the way the game is played. It's a continuous learning process. Mr. Ahmed, thank you, Mr. Mark. Mr. Ahmed, what is your opinion on this?
Yeah, thanks, Joshna. Maybe just some sort of very simple, practical advice. Let's work with what you can control. There are lots of things we don't control, right? Work within your sphere of influence, and simplistically speaking, look at your own competencies to succeed and win in the marketplace, right? It's almost like doing your own skills audit. What am I good at? What are my areas of development? Where can I go and seek that development? So I think this personal development that Bulelani and Mark have talked to needs to be taken really seriously, because you're alone and you need to work with what you control within your sphere of influence. You know, people on the webinar this evening may have heard the term expression, nature and nurture, you know, and sometimes we have this debate, you know, are leaders born or made? And the same sort of debate could be had about whether entrepreneurs are born and made. I'm less interested in whether that answer is either born or made, but I can tell you one thing, Joshna: nature, nurture, and exposure. These three elements could really bring out the brilliance in every single individual to the best of their abilities. So what is your nature, the kind of personal traits that you have, and how does that lend itself to entrepreneurial activity? What sort of nurture do you have in place? What are you doing for your development, you know, formally, non-formally, etc.? And lastly, what exposure do you have? You know, what complex ideas have you been dealing with? Who are your partners? What ecosystem are you in? Because if you can't get the exposure on your own as an early stage entrepreneur, then getting in with a business incubator into an innovation hub together with the redHUB and Black Umbrellas, for example, you'll get the exposure there with people who have been on similar journeys, right? So I think, firstly, let's work with what we can control, do a skills audit. Entrepreneurs don't tend to make time to do their own skills audit because they assume they have the skills in place to make their ideas work in the marketplace. They don't make time necessarily for personal development and exposure. And maybe you need to choose your area based on your strengths. If you want to work with the public sector and you need to be on the supply chain databases of public sector organizations, you need to know what comes with that territory. So I think it's about, again, being realistic and making sure you make time to, the old expression goes, sharpen the sword. Take time to develop yourself, get the skills, and make sure you're always at the cutting edge in terms of your skill set.
Literally just starting where you are and honing in on those skills and getting knowledge, just going out there and being inquisitive of what is needed for you at your level. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Ms. Kelebogile, what is your opinion on this?
Joshna, for me, I would say that surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, who are doing well within your industry. Perhaps you even have more money or doing very well in your industry. And when you do that, ask a lot of questions. Don't talk a lot about yourself. Ask a lot of questions. How do they make it? What is the best way of doing business? What is it that they do in terms of compliance? And learn as much as you can, because if you are always around people who or businesses or people who are not able to take you to the next level, there's not so much that you can grow with them. But surround yourself with people who are moving forward, people and opportunities, so that you can ask a lot of questions on how to go about it. Talking about the POPI Act, what I would advise entrepreneurs is that, especially those who are doing e-commerce and online businesses, to have their privacy policy in place, because penalties around POPI Act, it's not worth mentioning at the moment. So especially if you are doing lead generations online, or you are employing an agency that is doing digital marketing, just make sure that you've got your privacy policy in place. One of the things that I mentioned in my book, Money Bucket Holes, is 15 key factors that compare the old economy and the new economy on doing business. And one of the things that I mentioned there is digitizing your business. When entrepreneurs need to work around reinventing and disrupting themselves, especially during these tough times, to say, if you are in the printing industry, how can you digitize your services? Perhaps explore print on demand, because that way you're minimizing overheads, you're minimizing cost in production. So you work based on your demands, and you find ways to work around how you control your resources or your income, and making that type of an alignment. So it's all about finding a helping hand that can help you understand what your industry needs. So I like what Bulelani said when he said, you will find entrepreneurs within the township doing the same thing and being conditioned to say, these are the only type of businesses that one can explore. So if they go outside their comfort zone and tap into what can be done, if you are selling fruit and veg along the street, how can you partner with organizations like Shanduka Black Umbrellas on incubation to find out what is the industry in the food and veg industries doing, and who can you partner with, or who can you work with, who can mentor you, who can coach you in that. So we need that type of collaborations to say, let's empower those who are still at the bottom and give them a helping hand. But what is important is one needs to go and knock and look for those opportunities and surround themselves with those people.
I think, you know, when we look at it in a nutshell, it's about opening up your networks and not, again, being afraid to ask those questions, no matter how silly they seem. And just taking that step in getting out there and exposing yourself and what you do. And I love what you said about online, and I think I'm going to go with that question next, is that, you know, we've seen a lot of businesses going online. E-commerce, there's so many tools nowadays that just can help any entrepreneur go online. My question is that, you know, how do these businesses or entrepreneurs convince their customers to go online, especially, you know, since skills and connectivity are such serious challenges within the heart of our country? And I want to ask Mr. Bulelani to lead with that question, because I think it's so important for us to understand, yes, we all want to go online because, you know, of the pandemic, but how is it now that we take our clients, our current clients with us online and help our businesses grow with them and scale with them?
Thanks for that. I think on the first, it's just as a word of caution, right, to the business owner, to say that the moment you decide to take your business online, it's important for you to be able to map out which sort of platform will become the best platform for your service. And I think at a base level, what we have always said to entrepreneurs, you know, start at a Facebook business level and be consistent in it, because the moment you go on to digital platforms, it becomes a touch point. Now, I think what we've seen over the years is we've seen brands sort of set up multiple platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, and so on and so forth. And obviously, the moment you open up the touch point and consumers go onto that platform and they complain, you sort of are able to pick up the fact that there is neglect. And it causes a very big problem because, I mean, there's reputational harm from a brand perspective. So I think the moment you're going to decide to go on, understand where your consumers are, so that you can sort of decipher the product that you're trying to sell versus the consumers, and you are able to engage on that platform. I think on the second part is being able to also understand that the sort of ways in which you communicate will differ based on the digital platforms that you sort of want to participate in and go on. In light of COVID-19 and in understanding that the world is moving, and in light of COVID-19 and the fact that the world is moving online, it becomes important for you. I think this then more than anything puts us as entrepreneurs in a position where we use big data in this particular point in time becomes important. And I think when you start throwing words like big data to entrepreneurs, they sort of panic and get scared. But it's in understanding, it's going back to your actual customers and people that are buying your product and asking them, I mean, in the advent of the fact that we are now moved online, which sort of online platforms do you find better for you to engage and participate in our products? Because you would find that sometimes you want to go as high as Instagram, but your consumers are not at that level. And understanding their financial positioning, their literacy when it comes to the digital world, you could literally put it on WhatsApp for Business and you automate it, you know? And at that particular point, you would have integrated that to your business. But I think the big part as well for me in terms of also going online is it's not just going online from a consumer, it's not just going online and being able to engage and send information out to the consumer, but I think it becomes incumbent from a growth perspective for you to be able to inculcate digital and an online to how you run your business, how you manage your accounts, because I think what that will sort of give you, it will give you the agility for you to be able to manage your teams remotely, because I think we're also put in a position where we need to then now work from home and mitigating the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think if you are almost doing your accounting and you are running your sales leads, your prospecting, your quoting, your invoicing, from an analog perspective or a CRM system, then it's sort of going to limit the growth of your business. But I think the key thing there is the big data that you sort of abstract from your consumer data that you sort of extract from your quotation, your leads, your sales pipelines, the activities online should be able to put you in a position where you're able to decipher what are the best platforms, what is the best practice for the platform, and being consistent with the messaging on that particular platform. But the big part in terms of how you maneuver that space, you will always get from the consumer.
Absolutely. Thank you for your answer. Ms. Kelebogile, please share with us your views.
I believe in this way, when one moves from the old way of doing business into the online space, is to educate your customer base. Not just inform them that you're going online, but educate them on how to continue accessing products or services from your business. And don't underestimate the little document that tells them, this is my website, this is how you can check out products from my website, a little document that takes them through the checkout process, building that confidence, because a lot of people, you might find that your customer base are not affluent with the online checkout or using a digital payments or online payments. So don't underestimate, put as much resources as you can with communicating with your current client base on how to do business with you online. The other thing is be open-minded about tapping into the new market. Remember, if your business was more localized in your township or in a specific area geographically, so when you go online, you're talking about the whole of South Africa and beyond. So be open-minded to tapping into the new market and understand how they would do business with you. There might be some things that you need to tweak there and there to make sure that you also are able to tap into that market. If it means being reliant now on social media or to promote much of your businesses, for instance, if you're selling a product, and it's visual, how about now creating a collage of your product or a video of your product demonstrating how it works? Now the budget is no longer about a traditional sign or a billboard on your product and services. Now it's about Facebook marketing. Now we've got Facebook shop, online shop, we've got Instagram shop, we've got TikTok, we've got WhatsApp, way of promoting and selling your products or services online. So it's not so much about, okay, I have a website, now you can go and buy online. It's beyond connecting with your old client database and exploring the new market to make sure that you still remain efficient and profitable. And remember, now when you go online, chances are that you might minimize overheads in terms of your business. So when you see that an opportunity, make sure that you reinvest that money into the business. Explore tools or resources that can help you do your business efficiently. Whether it's an admin, whether it's relating to HR, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales and customer service, those are the plugins that you would need, resources that you would need to reinvest your money into growing your business in the online space. And read a lot about the online and e-commerce, because there's so much that you can know and understand and apply in a day or within 24 or within a week or just in a snap by just tweaking there and there.
Thank you, Ms. Kelebogile. We've got literally 2 minutes, Mr. Ahmed and Mr. Mark. If you could just give us a quick opinion before we just have some exciting news that we'd like to share and bring on the exciting news on the panel as well. So, Mr. Ahmed, I see your mic is unmuted, so you may go ahead.
Yeah, maybe just a couple of quick points, Joshna. Firstly, I think entrepreneurs need to understand that platform businesses open up a whole new universe of competition.
Yep.
You're not competing in your local environment, physical environment anymore, and you almost need to sort of stress test against, once again, your ideas and business. Are you still relevant in this open marketplace? Secondly, what is your digital skilling ability? When you open up an online business or element to your business, so your own digital sort of skilling and the digital skilling around your business. And so there's a whole lot of, if we give the expression, there's a lot of plumbing behind an online business that entrepreneurs often don't think about until they open up a website. And I think one needs to preempt what that plumbing is that makes an online business work effectively, and how do you manage those moments of truth, as Bulelani was talking about a little earlier. And maybe just the last point on this issue is, there's an interesting principle in economics that we teach of creative destruction. And this oxymoron simply means, Joshna, that inferior products and services will invariably be replaced by superior products and services and business models, right? An old example is what Uber had done to the taxi industry, but it's a very old example. So I think the online experience that you're thinking about for your customer has to be better and superior to what your competitors are offering. And so I think keep in mind that principle of creative destruction. It's got to be compelling. It's got to be better than what you've been able to do in your physical business or in your local business and what your competitors are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Mr. Mark?
Yeah, it's a huge subject, and I've only got 1 minute or thereabouts to
Not even 30
feedback
seconds.
on it. I think, look, I mean, at a certain extent, it's also just an enabling mechanism. The fundamental principles in a business don't change. You have to be providing value to your customer, and you've got to think about how you deliver that value. I suppose a big thing around online business is trust. The customer has to be able to trust in the process because they're not having that physical experience. So there's a lot of, in terms of B2C, there's a lot of marketplaces around. They're springing up every day. Vodacom's talking about bringing out a big platform. So is MTN, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, how do you differentiate yourself there? It's like being in a mall to a certain extent. How do you put your value proposition across to your customers? It's in your marketing. So those fundamental principles, don't change. And then I think we also have the big challenge in South Africa around the cost of data and people being able to access data. So those Black Umbrellas, we've just been through a digitization journey, and doing business in a digital environment, while those fundamental concepts still apply, there's a lot of nuances around having a digital presence as opposed to a physical presence, which one also has to be aware of and plan for. So I'll maybe leave it there in the interest of time. That's okay. But I think we've lost our host.
Good day, everyone. So I think we did lose our host and I was in the background, the naughty guy typing all the answers to some of the questions. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, firstly, for joining us this evening, and to our panelists, a very special thank you for making yourself available. I'm hoping that all of you are at home, so you're going to meet the curfew of getting from your whichever room you are in to your lounge. I've got to travel a 15-minute, but I'm sure I'll make my curfew as well. By the way, as you can see the name on the screen, the name is Hussein Essof, and I'm currently the overseer of the Regent Enterprise Development Hub, or what we call the redHUB. And the big announcement that we were going to make is actually the launch of the redHUB website, which I'm just going to share with you for those of you who want to take the trouble of noting it down. So we're very happy to launch the redHUB website. The redHUB is a unit of the Regent Business School. And without giving too much away, I think within the first 3 lines of that short paragraph, you will see that there is a wonderful collaborative arrangement that has been established very recently between Black Umbrellas and Regent through the redHUB. And I'm going to leave it to our panelists, to our viewers, to our attendees, to actually click on the link that I'm going to send in a minute, to go and have a look at the website and familiarize yourself with the services that we're offering. The services is open to everyone, although our primary target as Regent redHUB are our stakeholders, in particular our students and our alumni. But through the partnership and collaboration with Black Umbrellas, we are able to take that collaboration further that service further to many more people that are out in the market. So if I can, on behalf of Joshna, she's back. Joshna, you back?
Yes, sorry about that. I got kicked out.
Okay. No, it's one of those things.
I had this big introduction for you, Mr. Hussain.
You can still do it if you want. I'll give you a minute.
I would love to, actually. You've got such a lovely profile as well. So Mr. Hussain Asaf worked as an administrator in 2 provinces for 24 years at SANZAF. We initiated the enterprise training program as well as coordinated a bursary program. He completed a social enterprise certificate program at GIBS, and he is the current operations manager at Regent Business in Gauteng and manages the redHUB unit and the redHUB website, which I'm sure you all heard about whilst I was away. He's also achieved the Vilikazi Award for Leadership, and Mr. Hussain launched the Tawakkul in 2018, which is a crowdfunding platform that aims in helping NGOs raise funds. I hope I did justice to that, Mr. Hussain. And I'm sure you gave away all that's happening with redHUB.
All the secrets out of the bag. Yeah, guys. So please have a look at the website. Please note we got a 72-hour response rate. And so just in case you're wondering, you're not getting your answer tomorrow morning. But with COVID and all the restrictions, I'm sure 72 hours is nothing. I mean, we've got 16 days to sit at home. So we've got some time to answer some questions. From my side, thank you very much to all the panelists, especially to Joshna. A small confession for those of you who don't know, Joshna had to come in at the last minute as a moderator. Thank you for that, Joshna, for volunteering. Our previous moderator had fallen ill, and Joshna had so very graciously decided to help us. But she's done a wonderful job. I'm sure everyone will agree that she's done a really fantastic job at running this webinar this evening. So thank you very much, Joshna, Mark, Kelebogile, Ahmed, Bulelani, and I hope that our paths cross soon again. Over to you, Joshna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and it was an absolute pleasure. And thank you, to sit with such an amazing panel. I was absolutely honored. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm glad I could jump in at the last minute. So I'd like to thank everyone for giving their time, to all our participants, the Regent team, but most of all to our panelists for sharing their insights. All this dynamic and inspirational talk is part of the journey of being an entrepreneur, of getting involved. So thank you very much. And I hope everyone in this very challenging time stays warm, stays safe, and keeps well. And have a good night further. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.